Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith. Today, I am talking about Holly by Stephen King. This is from Scribner. It is his latest book, and I was not able to pick it up the day it came out, but I did get it 4 or 5 days later and jumped right into it as soon as I could because I love Holly Gibney. There, I said it. And just a little trivia, I already have 10 other reviews recorded and ready to go. This is jumping to the head of the line. Maybe it's not fair to those other books and those other authors, but they don't know. It's not like I tell people what I'm reviewing. So now you know. Now you're in on the secret. So, Holly. Holly Gibney from Mr. Mercedes and the Bill Hodges trilogy and some other things. I won't say specifically because I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read those things. I actually met Holly in one of those other things. Had never heard of the character. Read one of these other things. She was in it. I immediately went and bought the Bill Hodges trilogy. I haven't read all of those yet. I read Mr. Mercedes. And now, Holly stars in her own book. And in this book, Holly is still with the Finders Keepers Detective Agency. It's 2021. COVID is rampant. But Holly gets a call from a woman whose daughter is missing. This woman feels that the police aren't doing enough. She wants Holly to find her missing daughter. That's our jumping off point. Except there's kind of a cold open. Kind of ish. So we know. How do I get into this? I mean, this is a mystery book. First of all, this is it's fantastic. 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. I may be a little biased because I love the character of Holly Gibney. But it's I just think it's a great book, and it's a great thriller. I was going to say mystery, but it's not really a mystery because we know from the very beginning who is doing what. So, kind of almost a Columbo-esque kind of thing. They call it a How Catchem instead of a Who Done It, and that's basically what we have here. And the story jumps. There are timeline jumps, but it's all very clear. It tells you at the head of each part when it's taking place. And so, of course, the main story takes place in 2021 in a very short period of time as we're following Holly and her friends. Their current story. Holly's trying to solve this mystery, but then we will jump back in time to basically see what the bad guys are doing. Although there are some back in time jumps that deal with some other characters, one in particular. But again, none of it's confusing. It's very clear when everything is taking place. I'm not the greatest Stephen King scholar. I'm a fan. Haven't loved everything he's written. Haven't read nearly everything he's written. So you have to take anything I say with a grain of salt. I don't think this doesn't feel like the typical Stephen King writing. It's certainly not The Stand or any of the huge books where he's super detailed, super history, super background of characters. It's much more straightforward, I think. Maybe it's his more modern writing. Although I feel the Institute leaned into a little bit of that sort of background, but not necessarily as much. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you're a Stephen King fan, you might understand what I'm saying. He used to be and still can be very verbose, and this is not the case with this. This is only 300 and some pages, I believe, maybe 400. 450 if you count the author's note at the end. So 450 for Stephen King. That's a tight little book, and it moves at a brisk pace. The characters are interesting. The bad guys are well written. I can't say I like them. I like them as bad guys, but they're, for me anyway, they're in no way sympathetic. But they're very interesting characters, which is what's more important. Holly is Holly. I love the character, and there is character growth here, and there's so much to talk about that, but I don't want to give anything at all away. So Holly is following her clues, or following the clues. We're seeing what the bad guys are doing. There's some stuff going on with some of the other characters. There's Jerome and Barbara, and Pete, Holly's partner, and a female cop that they know, who I don't know if she's in Finders, Keepers, or Night Watch, because I haven't read those yet. She's barely in it. But just it's an interesting story. It's got great characters. This is a terrible review here, because I'm trying to avoid any specifics, because I highly recommend this, especially if you're a Holly Gibney fan. But even if you're a Stephen King fan, I mean, who am I talking to? If you're a Stephen King fan, you're going to read this. If you're a Holly Gibney fan, you're going to read this. If you're neither of those things, if you're just a casual viewer, I recommend this. This is terrific. Now, I'm gonna go off on a tangent a little bit. Excuse me. Recently, I read a book that I was highly anticipating. It was written by two authors. I don't know how much either of the authors did. One of the authors I don't care for. The other one I absolutely love. That's why I picked up this particular book. It is a mystery / thriller, but mainly mystery. And I was incredibly disappointed with it. I didn't bother to review it. And one of the biggest problems, among quite a few, one of the biggest problems was it felt like the investigator characters were going in circles, sort of spinning their wheels, and at the end, the killer, it's a murder mystery. The killer, although they've been introduced earlier in the book, has never been a suspect and simply confesses. So everything that the characters have done comes to nothing. Every investigative angle is completely a dead end, and then the killer simply confesses. Which it was just disappointing. The reason I'm bringing this up is because that is absolutely not the case with Holly by Stephen King. I'm going to show that cover again. I dig the cover. There's some little details in there you might pick up. Anyway, I think everything Holly does, whether or not it ends up being a dead end, it's a logical thing for her to do. And I think that the conclusions she makes are logical. There's nothing worse than a mystery where the detective or whoever is trying to solve the mystery just comes up with something out of thin air. There's absolutely no basis for what they have decided. Um, that is not the case. I think this is, again, well plotted, well told, amazing pacing, amazing characters. Um, and there was something else I was going to say, and I forgot what it was. Oh, I know what it was. Um, I meant to look. Normally, I don't look at any reviews until after I've recorded my review. But I meant to look at 1-star reviews, see if there were any 1-star reviews for this book, because I feel like there are going to be complaints about this book being political. Stephen King even sort of addresses that in his author's note at the end. Because it takes place in 2021, because of COVID, because of Trump, there are a lot of people wearing masks, but there are also a lot of people who think COVID is a hoax in the book. I'm talking about in the book. But of course, it reflects the real world. There are a lot of people who think that Trump's 4 years in office were horrible. There are characters that think Trump's 4 years in office were fantastic, and the election was stolen from him for his second term. The story takes place in the real world. And I don't know if it's especially nowadays or we just know more of it because of the internet, but there are a lot of people who complain about politics in their fiction. I'm trying to get away from the real world. Why are you throwing politics at me? And then there are people who think that Stephen King is a liberal nut job. So I wanted to check and see if that reaction has happened yet. I expect that it will. I could be wrong about that, but Stephen King does address it. He says, yes, this is the real world. You know, he likes to ground his stories as much as he can. Obviously, there are exceptions. In reality. And so reality is COVID, Trump, people on both sides. And he does say that Holly happens to be someone who didn't like Trump, believes in COVID. And he even says he likes to think that if his protagonist were the opposite, that he would still write them properly, I guess. For lack of a better term, that's not how he puts it. But he wouldn't make them out to be like an idiot just because they believe something he doesn't believe in. He doesn't believe in it, but he can write characters who do and make them realistic, if that makes sense. And he does say, and he doesn't preach either way. He just has some characters that believe one thing, some characters that believe another. Of course, I think people tend to be drawn to the characters that believe the way they do. But anyway, just sort of a warning that these are things that are in the story. COVID, Trump, real world issues. Both sides. You decide how well Stephen King handled balancing those things. So, anyway, ramble, I guess, without getting into it. Holly by Stephen King, 5 out of 5 stars. Holly searching for a missing girl. There's much more going on. We know who's doing what, but it's all about the journey. It's all about the characters, and I loved it. So there you go. That's what I have to say about Holly. Without spoiling anything, without getting into any details whatsoever. I loved it. I can see myself easily reading this again. This could become the kind of book that's an annual read because it's so quick and I love the character so much. But I do have 2 other books with her in it to read, so I'll read those first. All right. Now, question for this video. I actually thought of this ahead of time because I knew I was going to go off on that tangent about another book that I read. So my question is, when you're watching my reviews or my videos, would you prefer I simply tell you about the book, what I thought of it, what my rating is, etc.? Or, another way to put that, does it bother you if I go off on a tangent and talk about other things? Or do you enjoy that I talk about other things? Now, your answers, I don't believe, are going to change the way I do things. I don't have people around me to talk about these things, so this is it. I'm talking to the camera, I'm talking to you, and sometimes I go off on tangents. But let me know what you think. Do you look for a review that's just a review of the book? This is how the book is written. This is the basic storyline. This is what I thought of it. Or do you prefer what I like to think of as a more personal approach, where I ramble and go off on tangents and personal anecdotes or whatever? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is EricSmith5757. If you're on Blue Sky, I am @ELSmith. And that's all I have. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.